Because John is writing his gospel to a Roman audience some 20 or so years after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, about AD 90, he emphasises details of the trial of Jesus before Pilate, the Roman governor, why the Romans executed Jesus. First of all, the chief priests just hand Jesus over and say, please execute this man. But Pilate says, well, what's he done? He's a bad person, they say. Otherwise we wouldn't have given him to you. Okay, but what has he done? Well, they explain that he has gone around the countryside raising up the people against the Romans, claiming that he is the Messiah. Since Pilate is in charge of the Roman presence in Israel, and he has soldiers all around the place monitoring what's happening, this is all news to him. Surely if Jesus was stirring up trouble against the Romans, then the Romans would have been the first ones to hear about it. But here, it's the Jews just saying that Jesus has done this. And so Pilate comes to the conclusion that this is just from jealousy, that there's no substance to the claim that Jesus is setting himself up to throw the Romans out of Israel and re-establish the throne of Israel, even though he claims to be the legal heir to the ancient title King of Israel, derived from King David. And so he takes Jesus and has him severely scourged, has the soldiers mock him, and then presents him back to the people and says, behold the man, severely scourged, wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe in mockery. He had given him a very severe beating. Surely this would be punishment enough for whatever Jesus is alleged to have done. But the chief priests and officers, when they saw Jesus, said, crucify him, crucify him. And Pilate, getting a bit exasperated, says, you take him and crucify him. I find no fault in him. To which the Jews answered, we have a law, and according to our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. Now, this is a completely different charge to the one of him being a Messiah, but it resonates with Pilate, who was somewhat superstitious, well trained in the Roman gods and the Greek gods, a part of which is the fact that gods became men. And so was Jesus one of these superhumans who was a son of the gods? It was not a novel idea, it was a widespread idea in the Roman and Greek mythology. So when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid. What was he afraid of? Offending the gods. And he went again into the praetorium and said to Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you? Pilate wants to know the truth about Jesus before he dismissed truth. This is a very serious charge. It is an odd charge. What is the truth behind it? And Pilate needs this information if he's going to make a judgment. I have authority to crucify you, and I have authority to release you. Well, Jesus responds to this. You could have no power or authority at all against me, unless it had been given you from above. Therefore the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin. He's not saying that Pilate will be free of sin if he executes Jesus, but he is saying that Pilate's position, his power, is only a delegated power. He has been given responsibility. He is a servant to others, and he must do what they say. Therefore, if he does the wrong thing, but it's what others say, then it is their sin, more so than it is his sin. So Pilate's authority is limited. And in fact, Jesus knows that in this situation, Pilate has no power at all. He is completely in the hands of the Jewish authorities. So it is their responsibility. I have a few Jewish friends, and when I included that statement in one of my Christmas letters, I got a reaction. You are again accusing us of the death of Jesus. Well, that's where the New Testament puts the responsibility. It's not the Jewish people as such, though. It is the shepherds of Israel who delivered Jesus over to be crucified. So, from that time, Pilate evidently comes to recognize that Jesus is a very special person, and he seeks to release Jesus. But the Jews cry out, "If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar." They put the pressure on him and say, "Pilate, you have no choice in this matter, because Jesus has confessed that he is a king, and there is only one king but Caesar. Therefore, if Jesus is a king, he is in opposition to Caesar." Pilate can't dispute this argument, although he fully recognizes that there is no threat in Jesus. Jesus has not done anything deserving to death. He is who he is. But the screws are applied by the chief priests. So when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." Before he had beaten Jesus very severely and said, "Behold the man." But now he says, "Behold your king." This is what you want to do with your king. It's your decision to crucify your king. Because the crowd immediately cry out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" And to be precise about it, Pilate says, "Shall I crucify your king?" For Pilate has no hesitation now in naming Jesus as the King of the Jews. He was born King of the Jews. He is an extraordinary person. Are you Jews really wanting to crucify your king? To which the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Now, of course, not all the Jews accepted that, but this was the position of the priests. And so he delivered them to be crucified, and they took Jesus and led him away. Most modern translations have a serious error in them in this passage that we have read. For John tells us, "Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour," by which it is evident he means about 6 o'clock in the morning, and is therefore using Roman time, because he's writing to a Roman audience 20 or so years after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. So why do most modern translations say this happened at midday, putting them in direct contradiction to the Synoptic Gospels, which use Jewish time? Mark tells us that Jesus was handed over to Pilate about daybreak. By the 3rd hour he was on the cross, 9 a.m. By the 6th hour there was darkness until the 9th hour, that is, midday to 3 p.m. Then Jesus yielded up his spirit, and by 6 p.m. the evening he was buried. John's already made the adjustment to Roman time, and so when modern translators make the adjustment a second time, they in fact get it all wrong. The Synoptic Gospels use the Jewish clock because all these things happened in a Jewish community, and they are recording the events as they happen. The words of the Synoptic Gospels having been settled within a year of Jesus' death, although they were recorded maybe 20 years later, 20 years before the destruction of Jerusalem. So that if your Bible says these things happened at midday, then that's a mistranslation. These things happened early in the morning of the day when the Passover lambs were slaughtered.